This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best all-in-one platform to build beautiful sites for any and all of your needs, from portfolios to online stores. Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today we're going to be talking about TikTok, because who isn't talking about TikTok in the year 2022? Specifically though, we're going to be talking about TikTok's art community, and why it is, in my opinion, and that of many others, such a toxic, hostile, unwelcoming environment for artists, and for people in general. There are quite a few primary reasons that I'll be getting into, because TikTok is a very unique case in that its art community is not necessarily more toxic than that of other platforms like Twitter. It's just toxic in an entirely new, different, unique way. I'm not saying it's all bad or that no one should use it. I'm almost never saying that about anything I criticize, except maybe those old how to draw manga books. It's got both good and bad, and it's just like any other art community in that toxicity will be a part of any large group of people because people suck, and having a lot of them in one place means conflict. But the way that toxicity has been nurtured and cultivated by the nature of the platform is, to me, significant, and I want to talk about it. But first, let me take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is a website building and hosting tool that lets you create anything from a beautiful portfolio to a versatile online store. And as you guys might recall from another of my recent videos, I've been using it long before this sponsorship to make and run the site for my art studio, Royal Starship Studios. As you can see from looking at that site, the gallery features that Squarespace offers are perfect for portfolios, and the automatic image scaling means you can easily add and showcase art from any and all types of projects. But what I've been even more interested in lately is their e-commerce integration. I've already been selling my general art on merch for years now, but as my channel has grown, I've started considering making some actual Duchess Celestia branded merch too. And given how easy Squarespace makes it to use print on demand to add an online store to your site, I'm now working on switching my primary portfolio and website over and adding a proper Celestia merch store to it. And they've got so many templates and tools that making that switch isn't even hard. It's actually kind of fun messing around and creating a fancy new site. Anyway, thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and please go check out squarespace.com to get a free trial to build your website, be it a portfolio for your art or a store to sell it on, or both. And once you've built it, go to squarespace.com/DuchessCelestia to save 10% on your first website or domain purchase. Now, all that aside, let's get into the video. And before all you TikTok fans out there start preparing to kick my ass for daring to suggest that it may happen to ever so slightly suck, I want to make it abundantly clear that I'm not saying TikTok is bad or that the TikTok art community is all bad, at least not necessarily more so than any other platform or art community. I'm not saying I hate it or that you should hate it. I use TikTok, although mostly only to consume content and not post it, for reasons I'll get into more later. And for the most part, I enjoy using it. There are just a few very glaringly large problems that I've noticed in the process of enjoying it that I wanted to discuss today, because not only are they problems that should be brought up, they're problems that are weirdly unique to TikTok. And in my opinion, that's in large part because TikTok is, in many ways, a very different and almost sequestered community compared to other social media platforms. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are largely considered to be the big three of social media, the pillars of online networking that most people have and check simultaneously. Checking social media tends to be synonymous with checking all three, without any huge significance being placed on any one in particular, with some exceptions based on the individual. Therefore, the communities built within all three tend to have a lot of overlap, and while there are notable sociological differences between them, like Facebook being more family and friend oriented and Twitter being more drama fueled, there are no differences so large that a user of one would find themselves feeling culture shock when logging into one of the others. And when they want content that the big three aren't tailored to, they'll branch out. They go to YouTube for videos, Twitch for streams, others for news, and so on. But in many ways, TikTok has actually filled all of those roles for its users. Many of them use it as their primary social media platform, replacing or at least overshadowing the previous big three, while also using it as their primary source of video content, live streams, and even news. So while the president of TikTok calls it an entertainment platform rather than a social media platform, I don't believe that that's functionally true. The biggest appeal of TikTok is, to many, that it basically combines everything they love about social media with everything they love about video-based entertainment platforms, making it more of an all-in-one package of both than anything else. And because of that, the culture on the app is entirely different than either. Many people who use the big three of social media and the big two of video streaming exclusively find themselves shocked and overwhelmed by those differences when trying out TikTok, largely due to how toxic, reactionary, aggressive, and fast-paced it is. And when Twitter users are surprised at the toxicity of another platform, you know something wild as hell is going on there. They're from Twitter. For them to find something too toxic is like a fish finding something too wet. But as a result of that, a lot of people either find TikTok too polarizing and choose to avoid it, or love it and prioritize it as their primary social media platform, which contributes to something of a divide between the communities of TikTok and other forms of social media. That divide is only worsened by the generational gap, as it's primarily used by a Gen Z audience, while millennials and older generations tend to stick with the older social media platforms that they're already familiar with. Not only that, but the content itself separates the platform from others. Yes, TikTok makes it very easy for anyone to create content with very straightforward and user-friendly editing tools, but making content that actually gets the attention of an audience is uniquely difficult there. For example, as a content creator whose primary form of content is usually either still images or long-form, high-effort video content, it's very, very hard for me to translate that content to TikTok, where the focus is exclusively on video that's less than 60 seconds. In order to cater to a user base that is notorious for short attention spans and get their attention within the first few seconds of a video well enough to keep it, I would have to start creating an entirely new type of content just for that platform alone, which is why I've personally stopped posting there. I just don't have the time. When I used to work my marketing job, I ran the social media team, and while all other platforms our organization used were run by general social media coordinators, we actually had a specific manager for TikTok alone that focused on only that platform, simply because it was so different from other platforms that effectively marketing on it required an entirely different skill set and type of knowledge and experience. For better or for worse, because of its focus on short-form video content as well as its combination of entertainment with social media, TikTok is like nothing we've ever seen before in terms of social media in pretty much every way, both in terms of content and community. And that's no different for its art community. The things that make it so uniquely toxic as a result usually fall into the category of art-based problems or community-based problems. So with that ridiculously long preamble aside, let's talk about both, starting with the art side, moving on to the community side, and then concluding with an example of both coalescing into an awful, traumatic shit show for a young artist on the platform. So looking at TikTok's art community, it actually looks pretty helpful and handy on the surface. It's full of people sharing their processes, tutorials, and tips, and I've personally found a lot of really helpful art hacks on there, mostly pertaining to Procreate shortcuts and hidden features. Like I said, and will not stop saying, TikTok's art community is not all bad, and a lot of the content on there is valuable and constructive. But just like almost every other problem I'm gonna address throughout this video, it's the short-form nature of the content that makes this harmless, positive content such a problem. See, a large part of the art content on TikTok markets itself as being educational. It looks like it's a reliable resource for learning, like the creators making these videos know what they're talking about and can be trusted to communicate accurate and correct information. But if you only have 60 seconds to convey an idea, how well can you actually teach an aspect of art? Poorly. Poorly is the answer, almost all of the time. When I reached out on Twitter and asked you guys what you thought about the art community on TikTok, the answer I got most was hands down, the art tutorials are so goddamn bad. And yeah, they sure are. That was one of the first things I thought of too. And in some cases, it's because of the prevalent problem there that is beginner artists making tutorials without being anywhere near qualified enough to be teaching anything about art based on their own knowledge of it, yes. But in many, many other cases, it's not that the artist making the tutorials doesn't know their shit or is technically wrong about what they're saying. It's that they simply do not have enough time to communicate the necessary complexity of the points that they're making. For example, a TikTok could tell you to use certain color combinations in your pieces, but it wouldn't have time to explain why, based on color theory, you should be using those combinations. So you would learn the color combinations for very specific situations, but you wouldn't learn anything about color theory or how to combine those colors yourself in future instances. Or conversely, a TikTok could show you an example of how to draw a hand right and how to draw one wrong, but it couldn't explain why the right way is right or the wrong way is wrong. It's kind of like TikTok art tutorials give you a fish instead of teaching you how to fish. And this isn't inherently harmful, but it's also not inherently educational either. That said, it can be harmful in different circumstances, because really, that's just the best case example. There's also no shortage of examples of educational art content on TikTok that ends up spreading incomplete or outright incorrect art advice, simply because of the time constraint. For example, since TikTok art tutorials aren't much different than those annoying one-image art hacks on Pinterest and Instagram where they draw one thing right and one thing wrong and then give no further information, let's look at this one. They say the palm on the left is right and the palm on the right is wrong. And if the subject they're drawing isn't double jointed or is particularly stiff, or they're trying to convey a looser pose, the artist who made this is correct. But I personally can comfortably bend my wrist much farther than that because I'm double jointed. And by neglecting context and not saying this is only applicable in certain circumstances, or this is why it's applicable in this circumstance, the artist that made this tutorial is basically saying that my wrist is wrong or doesn't exist, and is teaching young artists to never draw wrists that way. TikTok art hacks are fundamentally the same, and in that regard, they can be detrimental to the education of young artists still learning how to draw, because while they're not necessarily flat out wrong, the way they're saying to draw right is really only applicable in certain circumstances and for certain reasons. And saying or implying that they're always applicable might end up teaching artists incorrect information and hindering their education and growth. And a lot of the people making this content content might not even realize the harm in that, because they might not consider that what they're not teaching by conforming to that short form video time limit is just as significant as what they are teaching, if not more so. Like, for example, teaching artists that shading with black washes out some color palettes without teaching them that there are other instances, like in traditional comic styles, where it can increase dynamic values when done right, is basically the same as teaching them that you should never shade with black, even if that isn't what they were meaning to communicate. And with such a short, limited time frame to teach them in, that's often inevitable, resulting in a huge problem within TikTok's art community, because content that's marketed as educational is either significantly less so than it seems, or is even outright incorrect as a result of the relevant context and complexity being sacrificed. All of this is just based on artists trying to convey complex points within the confines of TikTok's very short time limit, though. We also have to consider that based on the increasingly short attention spans of the platform's users, it's more than likely that even if artists could share enough information for their content to be properly educational and accurate, audiences wouldn't be interested enough to watch it. People like these super simple, straightforward, learn art in 1 minute hacks. They're not interested in sitting through a 15-minute explanation of why those art hacks work. Art education has to be quick, snappy, easy, and oftentimes promising dramatic improvement for many on TikTok to be interested in it at all. And unfortunately, that means it's really not going to be that educational. But that's just the tutorial side, which is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the problems with the art-focused side of TikTok's art community. There's also the equally significant and even more alarming issue of the prominence of trends. Trends are the backbone of TikTok. They're what keep users not only engaging regularly and constantly with the content of others, but what encourages them to contribute their own content to it and keep the platform booming as it always seems to be. Trends are also one of the most widely criticized aspects of TikTok, and for good reason. They're frequently known to encourage their statistically very young users to engage in risky, dangerous behaviors because everyone else that's doing it is getting likes. It's a problem that is much worse, larger, and wider reaching than what I'll be discussing today. But suffice it to say that the platform itself, rather than trying to address the issue, is promoting it and encouraging it. And in fairness, the art community, compared to other communities on TikTok, does not actually deal with the dark side of trends nearly as often or as harmfully. The trends followed within it don't often put people in any actual physical danger. But that doesn't mean they're harmless, because more often than not, art community trends on TikTok are based on mocking the art of beginner artists that the masses have deemed bad. This can quickly turn into outright harassment and bullying, where hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of users will dogpile an artist just for having art that isn't up to their standards. And because of just how socially acceptable following trends without question is on TikTok, no one gives it a second thought. It's just a joke, right? Everyone else is laughing and joking along, and you've seen 800 people duet the same video of a beginner artist drawing poorly with vitriolic and hateful mockery. It seems harmless and redundant to make that 801. The prevalence of trend following has also led to as much art fixing as Twitter, if not more, in which cases people feel like they have the authority to duet an artist process video with a fixed, correct version of their own. Sometimes this is based on social issues like whitewashing or body shaming, which is its own can of worms to open another day. But a lot of it is just artists seeing technical errors in the work of others and deciding it's their place to correct them. And that brings me to the final major problem with the art side of TikTok's art community, the unsolicited criticism. For reasons I'll get into more in the community section, people on TikTok seem to be unnaturally and abundantly comfortable being cruel to strangers without any acknowledgement of the fact that these are real people. And amongst other things, this has led to it becoming a community standard for people to comment criticisms on other people's art posts without ever being asked to, often even when that person has openly stated that they're not open to critique. Unsolicited critique is its own issue that I plan on discussing in its own video soon, but the TLDR summary of my opinion on it is that if an artist doesn't ask for critique, you shouldn't give it. You might think it's helpful, you might mean the best, but you don't know what that artist's goals are. They might not be trying to improve, so critique to help them improve is both unwanted and unnecessary. Or they might be particularly sensitive or insecure, in which case critique might do more harm than good or even prompt them to stop drawing. I know being in an echo chamber of exclusively positivity isn't conducive to an artist's growth, and honest constructive criticism is both necessary and deeply beneficial for any artist looking to improve. But not all artists are looking to improve, and not all artists are ready for that. So assuming that your input is both wanted and helpful is just incorrect, and maybe more hurtful than it ever will be useful. And on most platforms, for those reasons and more, giving unsolicited critique is widely regarded as a shitty thing to do. I mean, it still happens, but it's still regarded that way by most people. But on TikTok, it's just a normal thing over there to look at a stranger's work and blatantly comment everything you think is wrong with it, which is just, it's a surreal and kind of upsetting thing to witness, honestly, because 90% of it isn't even constructive in the slightest. I'll show some screenshots on screen right now of a handful of the comments I saw after a very brief look at the community so that you guys can see for yourselves. But the vast majority is just vicious, unsolicited hate. One person actually blamed an artist artist that was being bullied because, as they said, if the artist wasn't gonna fix what was wrong with their art, the way they're being treated is their own fault. Prior to researching this video, I avoided posting on TikTok because I didn't have time to make content exclusively for the platform. Now, after seeing everything I've seen, I'm avoiding posting because I'm appalled and disgusted by the culture of hate and animosity that's fostered there, and I don't want to be anywhere near it. In fairness, comments like the ones I showed you are matched twofold by comments that are supportive and kind, or calling out the people that are spreading hate, and unsolicited, non-constructive criticism. But it doesn't change that, at least in my experience, the toxicity is so much more prevalent and normalized than on any other art community I've ever been in. And I used to be on Amino. I'm still on Twitter, and I can't stomach TikTok. I think that says something. But all of that aside, let's move on to the next section, the community side of art TikTok, and the problems that the sensationalized short-form nature of the platform creates. The first criticism that's often levied against TikTok, no matter the community, is that it's widely regarded as the most toxic, extreme, reactionary, 0 to 100, cancel culture-riddled social media platform out there. And that's a criticism that I struggle to refute, honestly. But why is it that way? And is it really so much worse than its competitors? Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you my theories, at least, because all of this is really just an educated guess on my part. As I've already mentioned multiple times, the short-form content that makes TikTok so popular is also the source of the majority of its issues, at least in my opinion. It's also, in my opinion, the source of the toxicity that the platform is known for, in combination with the algorithm-based nature of engagement. And bear with me, because explaining what I mean is gonna be, well, exactly the kind of long-winded rambling that's basically my brand at this point. People argue that Twitter is also short-form content because of the character limit, and that TikTok is no more toxic as a result of that than Twitter is. People also argue that YouTube is just as inclined towards cancel culture as TikTok, based on the number of videos that will come out about a drama only hours after the details of it have been made public. Technically, they're both right, but there are flaws with both arguments resulting from the failure to consider context. Yes, Twitter is short-form content too, but it's very easy to share links, make threads, and post twitlongers, allowing the necessary context to be communicated during controversy. TikTok makes it much harder for people to even find a part 2 to your video, forcing viewers to manually go to your profile and find it from what's often a sea of other videos, which is an amount of effort that most people just aren't willing to put in. That means that you pretty much have 60 seconds to either communicate your entire point or convince viewers that hearing the rest of your story or point in a follow-up video is worth the extra step, which does effectively mean that TikTok is worse than Twitter in terms of one's ability to communicate all necessary information within the confines of short-form content. So yes, both Twitter and TikTok are just as bad when it comes to enabling cancel culture, but Twitter at least allows for more accurate, in-depth information to be communicated, whereas TikTok practically encourages its users to spread misinformation during controversy because it doesn't give them time to explain the whole truth. It ends up very quickly deteriorating into a shitty game of telephone where the original claims weren't able to be substantiated or defined. So then they were spread by other 60-second videos with increasingly less and less accurate information as time passed. And the comparison to YouTube? Well, that comes down to the time limit too. Yes, YouTube is terrible with cancel culture, and when anyone does anything remotely controversial, you'll see 50 videos about it within 50 minutes of it coming to light. But if nothing else, those videos are usually at least 10 minutes long. And I'm not saying that means they're better because they're longer, but I am saying that to make a 10-minute video about a topic, you have to do a few things. You have to include the majority of the facts surrounding the topic, you have to do some research into what happened, and you have to spend a significant amount of time during the research, editing, and production process thinking about what happened. You have a large window of time where you have to contemplate whether or not you should be making that video, whether or not the side that you're taking is the right one, and whether or not you have all the facts. This adds an extra step for a lot of creators, like a roadblock between them and impulsively commenting on something they don't know enough about yet. And it's a roadblock that TikTok doesn't have. TikTok doesn't give you the time to present proof, and it certainly doesn't encourage you to. TikTok makes it so easy to just impulsively react to a controversial situation with your own 30-second take on it, which is often hateful or angry or uninformed, and it encourages others to do the same. So yes, cancel culture is just as prevalent on YouTube as it is on TikTok, but at the very least, YouTube places some modicum of importance on being informed first. TikTok doesn't seem to care much at all for it. Comparisons out of the way, we still haven't fully addressed why exactly TikTok is such a toxic environment. We've discussed why misinformation spreads so easily there, but we haven't tackled why people are so thoughtlessly and guiltlessly cruel there. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe that it's partially because of the focus on algorithm-recommended content. What I mean is that despite the fact that TikTok is technically an entertainment platform, the majority of its users also see it as a social media platform, as a combination of both, where they can keep up with both their real-life friends and their favorite creators. And it's the blurring of the line between the two that makes things complicated and potentially problematic. See, on most social media platforms, for the most part, you generally see posts from the people that you know and follow, whether that's creators, family, or friends. What's promoted to you on your feed is based on either who you follow or the hashtags you follow. And based on that alone, there's a connection there. There's an innate understanding that you're interacting with real human beings, because more often than not, you followed them, so you understand to some degree that they are a real person. But TikTok isn't like that. The vast majority of users rely on its highly advanced algorithm to provide them with the content they're interested in on their For You page, which is only minorly influenced by who you follow, if at all. You can switch to your following page to see content from people you're actively seeking out and supporting, but the For You page is the default and the most popular way of engaging with content on TikTok by far. This means that when you're on TikTok, unlike most social media platforms, the majority of the content that you're seeing is from strangers. You're engaging with it like you would with normal social media, like you're talking to a friend or at least someone you know, but you're engaging with strangers, and you know you are. So immediately, whether you're aware of it or not, there's a disconnect there between yourself and that person that there wouldn't be on other platforms. You're not thinking of them as a human being, but simply as the creator of whatever you're looking at. And if who they are is automatically defined by the content that you're seeing in that moment, it's really easy to reduce them to just being that content. It's fundamentally dehumanizing. And if you don't see them as a person, it's really easy to insult, belittle, and mock them for their art. I mean, their art is all they are to you, so if you think it's bad, you think they're bad. And without knowing them or thinking of them as a person, why wouldn't you tell them so? It doesn't affect you. It doesn't even take a second thought when everyone else is doing it too. Especially on a platform where following trends and doing what everyone else is doing is the standard. It's so easy to be cruel, to mock and demean a real human being's art like doing so is harmless, to cancel an artist without proving that they did what they're being accused of, and so on, because you don't have any connection to them that forces you to see them as people. And on a platform where malicious and harmful trends are already considered commonplace, it's even more acceptable to spread hate without any real basis or justification for it. So we're left with an environment where beginner artists are constantly and relentlessly harassed and mocked. Artists of all levels are given unsolicited critique that more closely resembles bullying than constructive criticism, and artists are being cancelled over unsubstantiated claims. Now that we've established the primary issues from both the art and community sides of TikTok, let me give you an example of both sides combining to result in an unacceptable situation in which an artist was harassed and threatened to be doxxed over literally nothing beyond having an art style that people didn't like. As some of you who do use TikTok may know, Croquette is an artist who used to have an art style that put an emphasis on the eyes being very high on the character's face. Based on their Instagram, this is no style that put an emphasis. As some of you who do use TikTok may know, Croquette is an artist who used to have an art style that put an emphasis on the eyes being very high on the character's face. Based on their Instagram, this is no longer the case, which may in large part be because of what they dealt with on TikTok, but we'll get into that. They posted a video on TikTok of their rendering process, which showed their piece go from sketched to colored and finished. This piece was particularly stylized, meaning that the character's eyes were even further up on the character's face than usual, and that was apparently all it took for TikTok's art community to completely demolish them. I'll show some comments on screen to give you guys an idea of what exactly they were facing in terms of backlash on their art style alone, but there were probably a lot more on their original post, which has since been deleted alongside their now privated account. Them privating their account was even something that people celebrated, because a great deal of TikTok users thought it was hilarious that this harassment managed to get them to leave the platform altogether. Before leaving, they even tried changing their bio to say that they weren't accepting critique to deter people from trying to leave their helpful input on their posts, which was received poorly. People just used that as another thing to mock, so they left, which was another win for them apparently. Croquette was a prime example of both sides of the TikTok art community converging to ruin a person's life. On the art side, they faced the ridiculous and unfair scrutiny most beginner or amateur artists face on the platform, as if being anything less than professional and polished is a crime. They also dealt with unsolicited criticism and had their art fixed as a trend. On the community side, they saw the worst of unsubstantiated allegations being treated as fact. People hated them for making art they didn't like, and they hated them more when people decided to speak up and defend them for not deserving the hate they were receiving. So then claims arose that painted them in a worse light. Screenshots came out that they said the N-word, but they were completely cropped and edited with no actual proof that it was them in the screenshot saying it. Others claimed that they drew not safe for work of minor characters despite them being a minor, and others claimed that they whitewashed their Cookie Run fan art because their depiction skin tone was like 10% lighter than canon in a different color palette than the canon depiction. None of this needed to be substantiated for the TikTok art community to start demonizing them for being a racist piece of garbage, which led to them being bullied off the platform a second time. Still, even now, if you look them up on TikTok, you'll see a plethora of videos just arguing about the technicalities of whether or not their Cookie Run fan art was whitewashing, not whether or not it was right for this literal child to be bullied off the platform and face threats of doxing based on an unpopular art style and unsubstantiated claims. And that says a lot, because those videos weren't created with the intention of correcting an artist that they thought was whitewashing so that they could improve. The intention was to get them cancelled before they could ever draw again. Even if they had been deliberately whitewashing in the first place, which is more than debatable, they weren't told, here's what you did wrong and how you can do better. They were told, you're racist and you've messed up beyond repair, and we see more value in pointing at you and laughing than helping you change for the better. And that's one of the biggest, most insurmountable problems that I personally see in the TikTok community. And it's what happens when the art problems and the community problems coalesce. Ultimately, like I've said, it's not something we haven't seen with other art communities. It's something we still see now on YouTube's, certainly, and subsequently something I see myself all the time just by having my channel and using social media. It's just that the combination of all of the factors I discussed creates a unique environment on TikTok where all of the most toxic aspects of other platforms are nurtured and enabled to grow much, much worse. And I'm not saying that means you shouldn't use it or it's all bad. I can't stress enough that by discussing the bad parts of the platform, I do not at all mean to say that the whole platform is bad. I am, however, saying that if you do use TikTok and participate in the art community, number one, you're a much stronger, more patient person than I am. And number two, you should be careful to avoid participating in the dark sides of it too. Based on the huge focus on trends and the social disconnect between users and the artists they're viewing, it can seem harmless to jump on the bandwagon and start mocking and straight up bullying artists based on any and all flaws in their work. And I just think it's very important to try to remember that they're people too. And tearing them down is not helping them grow as artists, it's just tearing them down. I also think it's important to make sure you're questioning the accuracy and educational value of the tutorials on the platform, because taking those art hacks at face value can actually be really detrimental to your work. But so long as you're using TikTok cautiously and with its art community's flaws in mind, I'm sure you can have a completely positive, valuable experience there. I haven't, but again, you're probably a lot more patient and tolerant than I am. But that's really all I have to say about the TikTok art community. There are much, much worse aspects of TikTok as a whole, but that is fortunately a can of worms that other, more patient and qualified channels have already opened. So I'll link some of their videos in the description if it's something you're interested in learning about. But as far as this video is concerned, I'm finally done, and you guys are finally free of my rambling. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Special thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Joseph Solomon, Unknown Code, Lucian Izapa, and Abyss Reborn, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, This Is Totally My Name, Unity, Cora Fear, Jamisha Walker, Shirome Artiste, Elengshi, Soul Crystal, and Kim Yen for their support, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today's video is one that's been very, very highly requested, and that doesn't really come as a surprise because it's about art school. And what artist doesn't want to know what art school is like, or if it's worthwhile to consider for their future, especially given how relentlessly we're taught that it's a necessity in order to be a real artist or make it professionally. But honestly, I've really already said my piece about that, as much as I possibly can. Like, I didn't go to art school, and I was able to pursue art professionally anyway. And I've shared my experiences getting those professional opportunities in previous videos, as well as my experiences on the hiring end, learning firsthand that an art degree is barely considered compared to an impressive portfolio. I also learned through experience that the portfolios I reviewed varied so much in quality that it was impossible to tell just by looking at those alone who did or didn't go to art school. There were artists with extensive educations from accredited schools with frankly low quality work. There were self-taught artists with unbelievably impressive portfolios, and there was everything in between, because art school does not, apparently, have much bearing on whether or not you're actually good at art. I'll link that video in the iCard above because I discuss it in more detail there, but my point in bringing it up is that as someone who has never been to art school and has only ever done it professionally and learned online and through self-study, there's only so much more I can say than that on the topic of art school. So instead, I reached out to one of my friends, James, who did go to art school and complete his degree, and then went on to teach art himself. Please check out his social media in the description, primarily Circle Brush on Instagram, because his art is fantastic, and I think you should see it first for context of how great this dude is at art. But the relevant point is that he actually has the insights that I think a lot of you guys are looking for in terms of whether or not art school is a valuable experience. And fortunately for me and all of you, he agreed to do an interview. More than that, he even took me to his old art school and gave me a tour where I was able to look in on that environment, both the art and student-focused common areas and the actual classroom experiences, and see how students were taught in real time. I got some clips from that tour that I'll be including and reflecting on, but I have to say, being able to immerse myself in that environment firsthand for a day was just so immensely valuable to me in terms of widening my own perspective and disproving certain misconceptions that I had about art school. And I'm so grateful to him for allowing me that opportunity. Now, let's get into the actual video, because let me warn you right now, it's long. This is gonna be a long-ass video. And it's not because of any significant amount of work on my end, but because of the sheer amount of detail that James put into all of his answers. I'll chapter this video and have a table of contents on screen with an up next section on the sidebar during his responses, so that you guys can skip to the portions that you're most interested in. But you'd better get a drink and a snack and settle in, because you're about to learn all there is to learn about art school from someone who's been there himself. But since the interview section is so long, let's start off with the tour of his school first, so that you guys can have some visual context as to what art school is really like, and see some of the awesome stuff that we saw there. We're in art school, boys. This is James. Here we are.
Hi, this is my old school. And this is the basement. This is where they keep a lot of the craft, studio classes and stuff. Do we pass the workshop?
Yeah.
The wood place?
That's me. I'm her.
Ooh, hi. Awesome. So, dude will just like straight up like teach you functional carpentry, like functional woodworking in there.
Seriously?
And yeah, and that's important for a lot of students who are of like more traditional, who are building their own frames and stretching their own canvases.
Right, that makes sense.
That
sounds like a lot of work.
It does sound like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you can do all that, or you can go to a store and just buy a canvas.
That's what I was thinking. Is there any value to like doing it yourself like that?
Where do we draw the line? You know,
That's true.
when we're
That's
stretching
true.
our own canvases, like, are we crushing our own pigments now? Am I taking cow spit and crushing seashells to get like an
Yeah.
ounce of blue?
That's true. That's true. I guess the question is how much value does the effort itself have compared to the output?
Yeah, I think it's right. And what of tradition do we need to preserve in a contemporary learning practice?
Yeah, exactly.
For a practice.
Yeah.
You know.
That's true.
Well, we got pizza party.
Pizza party, oh my god. And here we have a room. Cool.
What?
We entered the room. Oh, that's nice. Wow. Well, that sure is a room. Oh,
This is
for
photo lab.
photo development? Wow.
I think.
Cool. The evil within still owns my heart, so that's very Stefano Valentini for me. Not to reduce an entire aspect of photography to one character I like from a video game, but that's kind of what I just Babes. Oh my god. I like that the one in the middle just completely failed you.
No, you'll cut that part out. I don't look bad. Don't make me look bad, okay? My school.
Explain how these doors are often opened. Okay.
So if you want to be smart, you want to be efficient in art school, you keep your like student card in your wallet. You got to scan to get through all these doors, and the easiest thing to do butt tap the thing. But as a result, everyone's butt juice is on this thing. So I wouldn't touch this. Not that I just touched it or anything.
Thank you. This has been very educational.
Wipe it back on my butt. It's all circle. It all comes and goes from the same place. I mean, unfortunately, I like this art, but this isn't what I love most about like MFA painting.
Yeah.
Or sorry, just fine arts painting.
Yeah.
Portraits is a really good exercise. And no, it's not for everyone. Not everyone's a portrait guy. Not everyone's a face guy. But it's a brutal exercise.
Yeah.
And it works because we're hypersensitive to people. We live in a people world. We live in a society.
Yeah.
And we're constantly scrutinizing people's faces. So we have like an incredibly high intuitive understanding for accuracy.
Yeah.
In faces. So if you want to improve like accuracy and your eye skills for analytical and art reading, portraits will humble you, and they'll always humble you because you can, it'll never be the perfect face.
Exactly. That's always been my shortcoming too. Mm-hmm. I guess it's probably everybody's in that regard then.
Mm-hmm.
The mystery.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's like the secret Krabby Patty formula.
Oh yeah,
and also just like the ingredients to get good.
Oh, exactly, naturally.
They don't want you to know. They lock it here, the core of the school.
Yeah, they have to, because that's how you have to pay for your degree first.
Yeah,
open this and you're cheating.
Yeah, and once you get your degree, you can only just peek. They can't have it. You can't take a photo.
Oh my god.
Can't make NFTs off that.
That's so ominous. James is leaving me behind.
Cool.
Whoa.
I don't know.
I have no idea what it is, but I feel like I should be jealous of the fact that they have it here.
Yeah. I think it turns you into a vampire. I think that's what it does.
Yeah, I believe you. Yeah. I believe you. Oh shit. The nest.
Student space.
God.
I can't. It knows.
This is actually so cool. Powerful vibes.
Condoms.
Excellent.
Now I'll clean it.
I'm so glad that just happened.
As you guys can see, there are some really nice places on campus. Looking at all of these cool environments alone, this place really does look like the dream. But what I wasn't able to film for the sake of student privacy were the classrooms, the active classrooms, which were in pretty stark contrast. The soulless, dull, low-effort way that students are taught here is honestly so crushing, especially seeing it up close in real time.
So James is in the bathroom. But currently, we are in a stairwell at his art school, old art school. And it is just dedicated to graffiti. And it's something that anyone can add on to and contribute to. And I have personally now, I think, spent 45 minutes looking through the whole thing and trying to see as much as I can possibly see in it, because there's just so much. James is in the bathroom, so he'll tell you a little bit more when he gets back. But I just wanted to give some preamble, I guess, in context. There's some of this that I might have to end up blurring for YouTube or trying to at least pan away from, unfortunately, because YouTube isn't the best for artistic nudity. But we will go down to the bottom where he graciously allowed me to contribute to the wall. The walls, there's quite a few. Technically, there's still 4. But there's so much. It's just so raw and real. I don't know. It's almost a visceral connection to every artist who's contributed to this. Some of them do it, they have memes. Some of them draw. It's the thing, everyone draws on everything. And some of them are just like venting their deepest thoughts and worries and anxieties. It's just all on top of each other. It's beautiful. Okay, so I did give a little bit of an intro to the stairwell, but James, tell me about the stairwell while we walk through it.
Oh, yeah, sure. This is the one unique stairwell. It's seemingly just like not there.
Exactly.
And it can't be that easy to expose yourself.
No.
And yet it is, and just walk around and look inside.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But you know, obviously I have a lot of personal experiences with school, which I think are due more to just like my personal personality.
Yeah.
So I try not to speak. I try to be very careful about generally what I say, my point of view on things, unless I'm, I don't know, just loose cannon, feeling loose cannon. But, you know, it's sad. It might be a bit discouraging to see what you've seen.
Yeah.
Or from, you know, your perspective, what we've seen. But like, this,
Yeah.
I wanted to end, especially we had to come back here because I needed to end it on here.
Yeah.
I need someone to believe that art is still alive, that it does mean something, that when you're surrounded by it and you're immersed in it,
Yeah.
it's like being part of the art school's subconscious.
Yeah.
The real AI dream of art school, what's really going on, how students are really feeling. That's how I feel walking through this, and this is unique though. I don't expect most schools to have this.
No.
At the same time, I don't think this is enough to sell for you to come to school just to be able to paint in the hallways or to paint in the one, you know, the southern stairwell. Because you can't do that in the northern one. Why?
That's so redundant. What? Yeah. But it definitely is reassuring to see just how much passion and creativity and love people still have for art, even when it can feel so draining and soulless to look through the actual teaching and educational aspect of it here.
This feels like the release, this feels like art therapy for the students.
Exactly.
I bet it does feel very therapeutic walking out of school and walking through.
Yeah, it's almost like a reminder of what you're doing it for.
Yeah, the collective collab of every student in school, putting up pieces in the stairwell.
Yeah.
Little pieces maybe covered up.
Yeah.
Tomorrow or next week.
Exactly.
And it's cool that you're still able to do that just for the sake of doing it.
Absolutely. It's just art that'll, no one will ever know who made it. No one is doing it for clout or for the sake of even creating something or achieving a goal. They're just doing it because they love it. And because they're venting something important to them. Or they're drawing a dick. It, you know, doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Maybe that's what they're passionate about. I really enjoy the mysterious shrine. Don't completely understand the mysterious shrine, but it's there. And yes, this one, this we will end on, is what I added to the wall because James told me this really, really nice meaning behind all of this and why we're ending it here after I started drawing it. So this is my contribution. I think it sums me up.
And there you have it. There was a lot, and I mean a lot, that I didn't get video of simply because I didn't want to film any of the students or their work too directly. But I'm glad I still got to show you guys some of the highlights. We were there for almost 4 hours, and as I mentioned earlier, the experience was so incredibly valuable to me because I came into it with a lot of preconceptions that were pretty quickly and harshly proven wrong. I'm someone who always wanted to go to art school but never had the opportunity financially. And over time, while I knew it was never something that I could afford to invest in or take time off work for, I eventually built it up in my head as some dreamy, romanticized experience where you spend 4 years surrounded by people with the same love and passion for art as you. And you have this picturesque time with your peers and mentorships with your teachers, and experience artistic breakthroughs and then move on to pursue a litany of professional opportunities with new skills. In my mind, it always seemed like a magical time. And showing up at the school, I was instantly surrounded by, well, exactly what I expected at first. Brightly colored, artistically focused focused interiors, huge art exhibits, quirkily dressed artists everywhere just like me, lugging around canvases and supplies. Right away, it felt like the exact environment that I dreamed it would be. And then we looked around, and the more we did that, the more conflicted I became. All of the student-focused facilities were fantastic. They seemed like places I would have killed to just hang out and draw in. And those common areas definitely were exactly like what I envisioned when I thought about art school. But then we got more into the actual learning environments and less of the aesthetic, pretty workspaces and hangout areas, and things changed. We got to talk to 2 students that told us about their color theory teacher who showed up late, left midway through for Starbucks, and then left early very regularly, and explained that their learning experience was basically just self-directed, because she was mostly just telling them to do exercises from a textbook and leaving them be to do it. Then we got to look into 3 or 4 active classrooms, and that's what really shattered my view of art school, I think. Because these were the classrooms for the courses that I wanted to take. The curriculum focused on design, concept art, and so on. And they were dark rooms with 20 students all staring at their laptops while either one teacher monotonously droned onto a PowerPoint, or one teacher had rotating groups of students come to them for guidance, while the vast majority sat there waiting on their laptops for their turn, which James explained was commonplace. Students would just sit there for upwards of 6 hours waiting to have a moment of their teacher's still divided attention. And I get that that's kind of all education these days. I understand that, but I can get that from online learning already. In my head, the most valuable things that a traditional art school experience would have had to offer that online learning wouldn't have, those are the things that are like hands-on teaching, where the instructors are actually sharing individualized, student-tailored insights and professional advice for the real world, or even just a learning environment that's more interactive and passionate. And in those classrooms, there was none of that. It felt soulless, draining, and tedious, and based on that environment, I would rather have learned at home from an online course, which, according to James, would teach me just as much, if not more. As I mentioned with James in the interview segment later on, if I were living on campus, I think it would be livable, just because the common areas seem so welcoming and inviting and creative, and I think that leaving those soulless classrooms to go work with my classmates and bolster each other's creativity in those environments would rejuvenate me. But the classrooms alone, in my opinion, have shockingly little value, and seeing them firsthand was a deeply disillusioning experience. And the idea of putting myself into debt for something that only has value for a piece of paper that probably won't even get me a job, and a community experience that's just nice enough that it'll make the rest of it bearable, it's definitely shown me that I might not be missing out on as much as I thought I was. But the community does, to me, seem so valuable, and that's a sentiment that I've heard from former art students everywhere when I ask, and that's why I'm so glad we ended in that stairwell, because that is the most beautiful culmination of that community I have ever seen. That's the kind of raw, visceral creativity and feeling and passion and pure love for art that I always imagined I would find at art school. And it feels almost like a rebellion against the cold soullessness of those classrooms, especially when compared to these shots of the opposite stairwell that has to be kept pristine inexplicably. I think it's a striking, hard-hitting visual representation of how art, as a means of expression and even rebellion, will withstand any limits or restrictions placed upon it, and that maybe if art school weren't nearly so corporate and government controlled, it could be a place for that creativity to bloom. It certainly did in that stairwell, no matter what the world was like outside of it. But that's it for the tour, and while we left it on a sort of hopeful note, the answers you're about to get about art school are not quite so positive, but they are real, and I think that's vastly more important. I compiled quite a few questions of my own to ask for this segment, and also asked you guys to submit some of your own, the most relevant of which were included in what quickly turned into an interrogation based on the sheer number of questions I ended up throwing at him. We did meet up to record this interview in person, but due to life getting in the way, we were cut short before we were able to finish it in a more dialogue, back and forth focused format. Fortunately, James was very accommodating, and we did the rest of the interview in the format of me simply sending him the rest of the questions and him sending back his recorded answers. So thanks to him, we do still get the full James interview experience, just with a different sort of vibe. But without further ado, let's get into that first part of the more podcast-esque interview now. Okay, so we are here with James. Could you please tell us a little bit about who you are, your background in art, what got you interested in it, and that kind of stuff?
Sure. Hi, my name is James, and I guess I'm here mostly just to provide like a little bit of a education perspective. I did work in education for a while and have a few years of experience teaching art after I did the art school thing. So I'd like to speak to that a little, but I also want to remind everyone that I am still a student, and I'll always be a student, so I'm really just a student speaking of some teaching insights.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's
Nothing
the
more than
attitude
that.
of most artists. Like, most good artists anyway are just looking at their journey as a constant learning process. I think the moment you decide that you're done learning is the moment you pretty much shut yourself off to a future in art.
Oh, totally, man. Totally, 100%. And if I could just like I'll speed run the your questions here. And I'm, just like everyone else, I'm trying to figure out how to live and thrive with art. I grew up on anime, cartoons, and games, just like most of your audience, Celestia. I have a few years of teaching experience. I just kind of fluked into teaching swimming at 15, did some social work inside the school system with immigrant youth in university while still teaching. And then, I did art school after that. And after art school, I got to teach for the city, for the local government in their art centers, which was really cool. And like to speak on art thing, I drew was fun for a kid, and I was the best in class, like many of us are, but I was mostly a hobbyist, and I quit in high school and university after to pursue medicine, and then, because it's tough, as all Asian kids find out. You switch. I went to art education, and I left there as I was not quite happy with the training. I went to like real art school, which was like the art college at the time, now university. And I originally, there's more to this story, but the short of it, I went in, finished, got a design degree, and I finished as a mostly straight A student, but in the wake of 3 dropouts and 3 academic probations. The art discussion, man. I love the art discussion. I love talking about art school because it's such a compound. We talked about it being such a compound discussion. There's so many interesting and important art things to talk about that get hit on just through talking about this one thing. Personally, I don't think it needs to be that big of a discussion. If I were to give my quick answer, it's no, probably not. You should probably not go to art school. And the kind of students who should go to art school, where art school might be appropriate for them, are if you're rich. And if that's the case, you should go to the coasts. You should go to the big cities: Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Canada, and obviously California and New York. So those are the places that would make the amount of money you're spending worth it if it brought you into like a big city with multitude of opportunities that provides over like a mid city or a small town.
Yeah, so the location is pretty inherent to the value in terms of the networking opportunities there.
Yeah, I would say it's geographically dependent. Yeah, the like opportunities for sure, and also just because the school has more resources too.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I didn't.
If
think
it's a
of
hot
that.
spot.
Yeah.
What that means is basically that like most people going to most art schools, in my opinion, might not be the best decision. That's what that means.
If money weren't an issue, if everyone could just go to art school and not worry about tuition, would you consider that to be a worthwhile experience for them? Just based on what's taught.
Based on, there's a few angles to come at this from. Like, one, what's taught I'm not quite happy with because it's all online for free, and it's all on YouTube, and you can pick and choose your mentors and instructors on YouTube. You can find the personality types that like keep you engaged instead of the ones that shrink your ego and make you not want to do it, but you have to do it because you're in school.
If money were not a part of the equation, like if you didn't have to worry about the debt or what that meant for the rest of your life, would you consider just the experience, both community-wise of art school and what's actually taught in the curriculum? Like, would you consider that in and of itself worthwhile?
Yeah, so a few other things I'm gonna throw in there. So like the money, we're saying money is not an issue, okay? But there's also your time, your effort, and your attention. Your time you can never get back. 5 years of your life, depending on what stage of life you're at, it can mean a lot to some people. I just blinked and I turned 30, That's crazy. I don't wish that young people would pursue academia so hard and put so many eggs into academia that they might blink and just be 30 and maybe not be entering a world that has changed a lot since when they entered the system, and also being a world that the system has not caught up to
Right.
yet in preparing them for it.
That is one thing I've heard a lot in terms of art school. Like, it's not something that has entered the new generation well. Like, it's still fairly behind the times in terms of what's taught, especially when it comes to making a career out of it. Like, most things, you go to school, you get a degree, and at least to some extent that degree will set you up for a career in the thing you studied. I've heard that with art school, it tends not to be the case quite so much, simply because the art industry is ahead of art school. Like, the jobs available to artists after art school are not what art school prepares the artists for.
Right. And like, here's the question. Can an institution ever catch up to the industry?
Yeah, exactly.
Will it ever
Especially-
catch up to the industry?
And it's changing faster than ever too, especially with the introduction of AI art, because that's something that we don't even know the full ramifications of yet in terms of art jobs in the industry. Things are changing faster than current employed artists can catch up to, much less students in the middle of a 4 or 5 year degree. I don't think it has time to catch up.
And yeah, is there a risk in kind of being in the hyperbolic time chamber, except your time is not being extended? 5 years is 5 years, a minute is a minute, right? Every minute you're in that room like doing irrelevant design assignment is a minute that someone else is catching up or learning a more applicable skill in the real world.
Yeah.
You may be falling behind in a sense. Yeah, so that's a tough decision too. It'd be nice. Yeah, it'd be real nice if money were no object. Everyone could go to school, but if that school, if the opportunity into that environment and that content comes with the price tag of the time commitment of you being committed as a full-time student, that makes it less appealing, because having to be in a building for 8 hours a day, it's like 70% of your waking life, and having to do a training program that isn't tailored to you. It's a one-size-fits-all training program, which means that's actually for nobody in particular at all.
That's one size fits all is kind of a deceptive term, because one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, and I think schools call that like multidisciplinary, or they'll use some like buzzword for it just to be like, ugh.
To make it sound less terrible.
Yeah. And the tough thing is that the curriculum isn't standardized. So what I've had in my school can be completely different from someone else's.
Well, that actually brings me to another question I had, which was, what kind of material actually was taught? And of that material, what of it did you find the most valuable and the least valuable?
Right. Yeah. My program was basically like concept art, entertainment design. And you know, for animation and stuff. It's the stuff we like. You know, our audience. I feel like we're in the same niche. That's pretty cool. So I like drawing people, spaceships, aliens, and guns and stuff, just like you guys. Yeah. And we learned like design process. You know, going from thumbnail sketches, color sketch, final, basic softwares, like the basic creative softwares, basically just like the four Adobe ones everyone uses: Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects, and InDesign. Actually, I take that back. Photoshop, and no, just Photoshop is probably the most universally useful one. We didn't learn Premiere. No, and I think video is like, we should talk about video. You know, After Effects is like motion graphics, so it's not quite the same thing. And yeah, InDesign is like layout, magazine stuff.
And InDesign is already on its way out in terms of relevance in my professional experience. Like, people are already turning to Canva as a free alternative and as an easier alternative. That's just what I've seen. But is it still taught in art school? Like, was it to you?
Yeah, it was still taught to us. We had to learn it, and obviously I don't remember any of it, and it doesn't really matter. Yeah, and if I wanted to learn it again, okay, I'd watch a YouTube tutorial. It's on YouTube.
But how much of what you were taught was just about like software? The word is not coming to me. Proficiency, software proficiency.
Yeah.
Like, do you find that the amount of that was taught was excessive? Like, you could have just learned it at home and too much of a focus was put on it?
It was very much about like foundational software skills. So at a certain point, learning like Adobe stuff, their menus, there's a pattern in their menus, and you figure it all out by yourself anyway, just clicking through stuff or just looking up keyboard shortcuts and then just working backwards from there. You know, what are the hotkeys they've assigned? Obviously, these are the important functions. Let's start with those. And like that's a smart way to learn on your own, but that's not necessarily how they teach in class either. It's the basics. So for Photoshop, you probably won't learn any like interesting digital painting techniques. It'll be mostly like graphic design, like tweaking photos. But this is shit kids do on their own now, and this is shit they do they'll send their stuff off from like 3 different apps to do it, and like it's not that hard because so much of that has been automated.
That's very true. Yeah.
Oh, I should also add, yeah, so software size, I would say it's largely negligible unless you're the kind of person who really needs your handheld to learn software, where then I would say like that these classes are way overpriced for you. They're like $600 a pop, and you have to commit to the entire, you know, design curriculum and whatever. Just find a local art center class or do something online, or, you know, slowly try and chip away at it, teaching yourself how to learn. You know, useful skill. You can never go wrong long, teaching yourself how to learn. We also had the art humanities. Whatever school I'm at, as they've become a university, it kind of usually means that there's more of a say on like what humanities are taught. And that's usually what it means when like I think schools get accredited, is that there's just more government control over it for, a few, the extra funding.
And do you find that to be detrimental to the actual curriculum for artists themselves, the government control increasing?
Yeah, just typically speaking, like having more vectors along a certain process of getting things done is just always bad, especially for art when we're trying to catch up, when we know we're behind, when we know we don't have a chance of catching up, but to just be at pace at best. Any extra room for just more bureaucracy is always a bad thing for the students.
Yeah.
Students, for the students.
Right, that makes sense.
There's an interesting podcast, the Drawn Today podcast, local professional artists in our city. You did some Hearthstone art and stuff. It was good. On the podcast, he asked the same question: what percentage? You probably saw my notes here, but he asked his round table of friends what percentage of what they learned in art school do they typically use in their everyday professional art practice, and it's about 5 to 10%.
That is shocking to hear, honestly.
Yeah.
And not good shocking.
And that came as a result of him going back to the school's portfolios, to the portfolio show, and doing the round with the students and being asked that question and having to give like a 5% answer. 5% of what I did when I went through the exact same track as you to being a working professional right now, 5% of that was useful to my daily practice. Those are strong words from a professional.
Yeah, that's compelling. That in and of itself is incredibly compelling and very disheartening, honestly. That's a low number.
Yeah, save that one. I didn't drop that one on the school tour.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, the school tour was already disheartening in its own manner, but that's
that easy.
Ooh.
Should that easy to break, Celestia?
No, it shouldn't have, but it is. Well, okay, so we've established what's not valuable about art school, but what do you find valuable about it? Like, were there things that you learned there that you feel you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
Yeah, and it's not fair for me to say this. Not fair for me to say that I got a lot better at learning on my own and, teaching myself how to fish.
Right.
But as a consequence of what I felt was just inadequate in my...
Learned more trying to fill in the gaps of what art school didn't teach you?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And it was very clear that this is more of a personal experience that, what our program advertised that it would be, they actually don't have the resources to teach you all these skills. So, but at that point you've paid for like 2 years of it already. So it's a bit of a sunken cost fallacy.
You've committed already and you can't jump ship now.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. So for most people, like if you're going going just full tuition, full time, 2 years in Canada might be like 20K. And if you're living on your own, right, that's like living on your own in a city is like 25K. You're that much in the hole. I understand that a lot of students just wanted to finish and try to make the best of it and taking it into their own hands and just putting their head down through the rest of class. Teaching yourself how to learn is just straight up an artist 2 skill. Me and Celeste, you were talking about artist 2, artist of the now, of the future that is now, because things are moving that fast. We have to learn on our own. You have to learn to do your own accounting, learn to edit video, learn social media, learn to look up the algos and to keep up with the algos, right?
That's a job in and of itself.
Right. Like so much self-learning the artist has to do. Why not start now? First year fundamentals, art school, I first learned them from books just out of my own curiosity beforehand, but the school does do a good job teaching the first year fundamentals. These are foundational skills: observational drawing, color theory, values, like value drawing, design drawing. But as we were discussing before, as I figured out, as I remembered, they teach all this stuff in parallel, which means you have to do all this shit at once. So if you want to switch into that particular, very specific analytical mode of sight-sizing your art, right? It's just like that takes flow, that takes time, and that takes like commitment. But it's hard to make these intelligent art education decisions when you're just overwhelmed with learning everything at once. In classical art, there is a progression system, so you would not be learning this stuff. You'd be learning observational drawing first, and then you'd be learning value drawing, and then we'd be progressing from there.
Yeah, because all of those skills build upon the foundation of the prior skill that you just mastered, or at least learned the basis of.
So yeah, and like what I think is effective in this other method of teaching, the atelier curriculum, classical curriculum, academic art curriculum. Those are all terms because we can't agree on what to call it, but those are all search queries for you. But about that classical art thing, it lets you do a deep dive into one subject at a time, and it just so happens that the first subject, most important one, which is how to read art, how to use your eyes to analyze art, how to see, and that's an EXP modifier. I call that because everything gets so much easier. You'll have to read art to do your studies.
Of course, it's the foundation for everything you do.
Yeah. And if you cannot worry about reading art, if you're able to just take a few glances and be able to, chicken scratch the general shape of things, it's super helpful. I'm still so grateful for the amount of shit I ate to learn observational drawing. And honestly, it's not hard at all. I learned as a kid from a book, and it didn't need to be that hard because we didn't have tutorials at the time, but you can just literally follow along some dude's YouTube and learn observational drawing. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it really carries on throughout everything you do in your own work too, because even being able to look at your own work, and it's the difference between saying, I know this looks bad, I don't know why, and saying, this is what I did wrong and how to fix it.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference in terms of improvement.
Yeah.
Because I spent years of my art career looking at it thinking, I know this is wrong. This isn't how I want it to look, but I don't know how to make it look right because I don't know what's wrong with it. And observational drawing is what I didn't learn first. And once I did learn that was the crux of my improvement.
Right.
Because I was suddenly able to look at it and figure out what was wrong and what I wanted to be right, and look at the art of other people and then say, oh, these are all of the aspects of their work that were previously intangible, and I couldn't figure out what I liked so much about it. But now I can incorporate it into.
Now I know what to steal.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. I love that, and I think it sucks that for a lot of people, their art improvement is bottlenecked by their analytical skill, by just the fact that maybe their artistic eye isn't trained to the point. If you think about it, it's a lifelong skill because it's the one that allows for self-diagnosis. So if you can always check in with yourself and know when and where and how to improve, it's huge. And like, it's no surprise that like from observational drawing, you move on to like the second most important thing, which is like not reading shapes and lines to make a figurative structure looking thing. It's reading values. But yeah, like I just wanted to bring that up because I want people to know that the classical curriculum has a rhyme and reason to it being in that progression order, is that it makes learning easier, and this is how Renaissance ateliers did it. It's the only thing we have to be considered time-tested, tried and true. There isn't a lot of R&D, learning, teaching, research done in how to get good at art. Hard thing to study, harder yet to fund, I bet.
I would imagine.
Yeah. So all we got is, as far as, data as to what works consistently on how to get good, is this classical thing. I just wanted to go off and introduce classicism in the art context real quick there.
For sure.
But in terms of value, I think me and Celestia talked about this a lot walking through the school, but just like the community, having common ground for a community is super important. Having space for a community is super important. Being in a community allows for you to have your plus minus equals, like having, this is like a UFC concept, but having a plus, a minus, and an equal, having someone just one step ahead of you and having someone just one step behind you for you to teach or mentor, right? And having one person who is your equal.
I would imagine that's really, really, really helpful in terms of like actually quantifying your own growth as an artist too, because I know a lot of people, myself included, struggle with being able to look at your art and see how much you've improved and then set a course for how much you want to improve and actually be able to quantify what that would look like for you. And I imagine having that like peer review system would be a really good way of validating that almost and being able to measure it.
It's a cool thing too that if everyone adopted this plus minus equal system, then everyone would have a mentor, everyone would have, a student, like and everyone would have a rival,
exactly,
and you're
The
encouraged
Gary.
from all three angles. What did you say?
The Gary.
The Garys, yeah, Gary Oak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for you.
No, that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, and it's so much easier. Yes, you can do that online, but it's so much easier to do it in person with a group of people that you're seeing every day for 8 hours a day for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
This is an important one. Sorry guys, I'm just reading my point form notes here. I wanted to give people value, so I wanted to put down some stuff you might have not heard. Okay, way. So having reference points for how artists grow and progress and learn over, people want to call their art school years the art formative years. Let's not call it that. I don't think your art formative years are your art school years. But if you're with a group of people for 5 years, the same group of people for 5 years, you will have like so many data points of how other people have learned, what they do, how their styles have changed. You know, that was super important for me when I was teaching, but what are the merits of that for like just the practicing artist?
I don't know. I mean, I think with art, it's almost... There's so many points in your journey of improving as an artist that sometimes it'll feel like you're not improving at all, when in reality your understanding of art can very much be growing in the background without it actually seeming to be reflected in your work that much. Because I mean, the improvement that I've seen in my own work over the past 2 years has been exponential, but now the improvement that I see between my existing pieces is smaller, because the amount of improvement that goes on behind the scenes is more valuable. So in my perspective here, I think it would be really validating to just see that almost quantifiable proof that because art is not a linear journey of improvement, others are also having that exact same thing. And it's not just you that seems to have plateaued or reached these different points in ways that are not necessarily as clear and clean cut as you'd like them to be. Like, it'd be great if you could have a list of milestones to hit throughout your art career or your art journey, where it's like, okay, yeah, I reached this checkpoint. I can save now and keep going.
Right.
I've improved just enough to be proud of myself, but it's not like that. And sometimes it can feel really demotivated. I don't think that's a word, but we're gonna say it anyway. It can feel very demotivating.
It demotivates
now
you.
I can't even say the word at all. But it can feel very demotivating to look at your work and not be able to see quantifiable improvement. So to see it throughout other artists and see them struggling with the same thing along the same timeline, I feel like has a lot of value.
And well, when you messaged me, like you said, nebulous, like navigating a nebulous space, it's absolutely a nebulous space if you don't do the research. And like a lot of things, people are counting on you not doing the research to make money off of you.
Exactly.
What that means then is that doing a little bit of research can make you a lot of money, or at least give you a lot of what would have been value to the money that you spent. So doing the research is totally worth it. Deep diving on forums, you'll come across some really crazy stuff. You'll come across some really useful resources, some timeless resources at that. Like navigating a nebulous space, there's just a fog of war. You have no idea where you're going. You may run into a corner, you feel the corner, you go around, you don't know if you should be going around the corner. You try it anyway, but it's the same navigation of that same nebulous space. We were all incredibly inclined for art improvement. We wanted to get good. Guys, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm trying to talk like a smart person over here.
We're not smart people here.
It's like I tried to trick you first into thinking I'm a teacher or some shit, but no, I'm still learning just like you. Okay, you never know as a student, even in art school, we never knew what we were doing, if we were going the right way. We were spamming techniques in the dark and seeing what sticks. So that nebulosity is there, even in an institution with like practitioners and educators. But what's different is that you're not alone. I think that's huge.
The solidarity there.
I know. What else is valuable about art school? Well, I hate to say it, but 3 years later, the humanities are pretty cool. But once again, you don't need to pay $600 a class to read 4 books. You can go and find those 4 books online, probably on Google Books for free or something. I don't know, or some other place, you know?
In terms of the humanities, just because I feel like my audience is pretty varied in terms of what they actually have personal experience with. Could you go over what the humanities actually look like in terms of learning for people that aren't familiar?
Oh, dude, it's so random, but it's just interesting stuff. It's just like any weird soft art skills. So I took a lot of classes called story. One, the teacher was awesome, and there was very little homework. So it was like, whoa, that's the double-double.
Right there.
That's a double-double.
Oh, hell yeah.
Maybe, you know what, that was just worth it alone, just for me and where I went with teaching, just to see this guy teach. It's very inspiring, but I can only say that like mostly after the fact. If you're a frustrated student trying to get good at art, in the moment, it's very hard to get out of your head, enjoy class, and learn and be present when you have 17 other things to do, and you feel threatened by the school dropping your scholarship, or you showing up late a third day and them kicking you out of the program, if that's a rule there, because they can make a rule out of anything, so it's kind of strange.
That's terrifying.
And yeah, and like, have fun learning, right? Like that's how we learn, under intense, scrutinizing, soul-wrenching despair.
Yeah.
Best time to learn, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, that does bring me to another question. Did you find that the environment of art school was conducive to creativity, or do you find that it crushed it, to put it bluntly? Like, I know today when we looked through the school, there were aspects like the community areas that seemed like they would be really conducive to creativity, but then we took a look at the actual classrooms, and that did not seem to be conducive to creativity. Do you feel...
Let me see if I can answer without looking at my notes and form an original thought for once in my life. That's true. That's true. I don't want to look off. I don't want to cheat off of this kid's notes, though.
Oh, this kid, yeah, for
being
sure.
Me, my
for
own
sure.
notes. Creatively, I'm just trying to think of I'm trying to speak to just more of like the pure experience of just us walking around looking at stuff. Was it conducive to you? How do you feel as an outsider, as a third party?
I feel like if I were in different circumstances, it could be. Like, I'm someone who wouldn't, if I went to art school, I wouldn't stay on campus. I would be living in my home. So I feel like for me, it would be, I go in, I go to class, I go home. And based on that alone, I would say, like, looking at those classrooms and the way that things are taught, no, it's not at all conducive to creativity. In fact, it's less conducive than if I were doing an online course in my home. But like looking at the common areas, if I were someone who lived on campus and I was like fully immersed in that lifestyle, I feel like it really could be, because the common areas are clearly so made for artists to use all of those resources and build connections within each other, and then sort of bolster each other with our creativity as a collective. Almost, I hit that with my ring. It's fine. I can't edit that out, especially now that I've acknowledged it. This is just the way it is. But I feel like if you immerse yourself completely in that environment, it could be conducive to creativity simply because of the community aspect. But the classroom side doesn't strike me as enough in and of itself. In fact, I would see it more as a deterrent.
To be specific, Celeste, you saw a few classes in session, classes from my side of the school's program, which was like design, illustration, character design, blah, blah, blah. And just kind of people sitting around in a room.
in the dark.
We spent so long at the school, but like that's your direct experience.
Yeah, it was very valuable.
You to have that direct,
I appreciated that a lot, yeah.
That means more than like reading my point form bullshit, right?
That's fair. I mean, we could wrap this up here, and then this is the art process. So as the art process goes, it has been interrupted. That's an inevitability. So we are going to have to conclude the back and forth dialogue section a little bit early here, but James will be continuing to give us his wisdom and his insights in a more question and answer format.
Don't you leave, I'm not done with you.
Yeah, no, you aren't free yet. We have more. You can't leave.
There's a lot more art to talk about, a lot more content.
Exactly. So please bear with me. We'll cut to that next.
This is when the real world decided to break us out of our bubble of art-related gushing. So from here on out, the interview will continue in a more direct question and answer format, as I mentioned earlier. Because James will be reading both the questions and answers himself, I'll just go ahead and leave that to him and spare you guys from my voice for a blissful hour or two.
Was the most valuable part of art school for you? And one thing I'd like to add is that being in a creative community, but also being in a creative learning community is huge in how that affects you, because now you're immersed in a certain type of culture. You're immersed wholly in a learning culture. You're more incentivized to be learning. You'll have more opportunities to get new ideas because you're in the community, and you're more likely to get feedback, and you're more likely to want to kind of fit into the community too, by ways of also being learning and being up to pace. That kind of goes into the question right after, which was what was least valuable about art school. And that in and of itself is so cool, being part of a learning culture, but it can get the other edge to that blade when you start to have unique ideas about how you want to learn or how you think things should be done. It is very hard to go against the grain of the tribe and the culture. So that's sometimes a problem. If you have issues with the way that things are being taught, or the ways that the people have kind of programmed your learning specifically, And by the way, that is a learning program that you have to adhere to, or else what? You're not gonna do your homework, then they just kick you out. So you have to do it. Whether or not you can trick yourself into thinking that it matters, or if you can have the self-confidence and skill, it does take skill to just phone it in and do the bare minimum to get like a passing grade on the assignment. There's still a lot of like emotional anxiety and a lot of like just, I think, creative leakage that happens because of all this consideration and decision making that a person has to do instead of just making a piece that they like. Spending the work mileage and the emotional mileage that it would cost to do that other thing. Instead, you can just make art. You can just make art for fun, and even if you got nothing out of it, it might have been more than if you'd done an assignment that you like is just irrelevant for you, your career, or your goals as an artist. And the thing to keep in mind is that at some point you will realize that most students being too close to the tribe is sometimes dangerous because the tribe is sticky, and just being part of that kind of groupthink thing is tricky because most students don't see a lot of improvement out of art school, in my opinion, and not enough for the 5 years worth. So you can see my stuff on Instagram. If you look up Circle Brush, you can take the last post and like go back 5 years or something. I think like just go 2018 and go 5 years back, 2018, 2019. I would say that like though I was almost satisfied with my growth, like not quite, I was, whatever that looks like to you, is kind of on like the upper end, like top 80 top 80 percentile. Like I'm in like the upper 80% of like most improved people. I do think my case was a bit different too for improvement because I did start doing my assignments differently. Like I just did them the night before so that I'd have time to just do whatever I want otherwise. And that again is a personal thing because I thought it was pretty obvious that our assignments just like were not helping us. Like the 30 hours you'd have to sink into like assignment X, Y, and Z is better off with you finding some way to divvy that up and to scrounge an extra 10, 15 hours out and just do some other form of training completely for yourself. Or to like even sleep would be a good investment because you're a student. You need that. You're learning. And most students don't have that. So you'd be getting like a biological advantage. It's kind of weird, but most people would sacrifice sleep first. I get it. Next question. What was the least valuable part of art school for you? Yeah, I think it is the time and emotional commitment because it does demand such, and it also demands such in like subconscious ways. Like I said, once you're part of, the student group now, consciously or not, you'll start to care about things everyone else kind of cares about. And it does take some awareness to like even have the courage to kind of stand, and I don't know, just like stand your ground on certain practices, especially if they're education-based practices. Like, I don't think this is the best way for me to do this X, Y, or Z to get better. If you have another idea for getting good, you really do owe it for yourself to go and try that thing. One, you have the initiative. You're gonna focus on it and try harder and be more engaged in your assignments. And I think that's a bigger problem than we realize. Just the fact that a school can have an incredibly rigid learning plan or instructional design, curriculum, whatever you want to call it, or it can be like a progression system or like the lack thereof, abiding to any logic, rhyme, or reason in having a progression system. The fact that it commits you to this very specific art school learning program means it also closes the doors. And I do think, like, even though you get to go home, I do think it closes a lot of doors for your independent learning. And like, that's a skill that you'll take with you for the rest of your life and for the rest of your practice, is like just learning how to learn on your own. That's a problem, in my opinion, because the time commitment to be at school usually is just too much. Like, if you kind of get bad looks for like trying to leave class early, or eventually the teacher will like talk to you about leaving class early. Again, from my personal experiences, I think oftentimes you'll find that as a student, you'll just be in your classroom working most of the time. And when it's all digital, some days it's hard to justify putting pants on to get out of bed, to go to class, to sit there to work when I could have just got up and turned on the computer and worked. So the opportunity cost of having to commit to a full-time learning program, I think, is very steep because it does close off a lot of self-initiative projects. And I think it's always just giving you a great excuse to not do something you want because you have to do school first. Well, because you paid for it. Well, also because they have your flame to your degree now. If you back out, you get nothing. So it's just a strange situation to be in. I also think that the expectation of real-world experience from art art school like might not be as valuable as most people think, just because if you think about it, like the industry is the industry, and art schools at best they can keep pace because they aren't the industry. But are art schools keeping pace? Well, only very specific art schools, in my opinion, the ones that are like in the hotbed of the industry, like Art Center in California, around Hollywood, right? They have all the resources of the industry physically in place. In fact, they might just be a spot inside the web of the industry. So the claim of real world experience like can come with this asterisk that the institution might be will probably be like, you know, a couple of years behind on the industry at best, and that's it keeping pace with the industry, right? That's the best case scenario. What also happens is you get contract instructors from the industry and they'll just like kind of teach their like one class, and that's the opposite situation where they'll basically just give you the lowdown on everything. Unfortunately, I wouldn't bet on every teacher being a contract industry teacher if that is what you need. Oftentimes we don't get the choice, or if you do, it'll be between like 2 or 3 people. You as an individual artist, you're able to like email any of these industry professionals. We did that and we were like talking over our hit rates, and our response rate was about like 60%. Mine was about 60%. Like most people responded. You can email these people about anything and just write a thoughtful email and keep trying. It's mostly a numbers game. And honestly, I think any contractor teacher, like any industry teacher who's doing just like, you know, just their one class at the school, they're already interested in helping students. I do not think that I expect any student to forgo a $50,000 price tag just to be able to have them answer a student's questions. I don't think any instructor, I don't know, am I maybe I'm dreaming here, but I'd imagine that if there was a particular teacher and you couldn't get in their class, you could probably email them. You know, I think it's honestly fine. And if you're on the outside and you're not even in the school, I honestly think it might be worth a shot just to email some people and message them. We were able to get a lot of responses. We already know that these people are interested in helping students. So what else do I feel wasn't valuable in art school for me? I don't think the product deliverables, the education deliverables are valuable. This is the how to get good at art stuff, because most of this is already on the internet. You can basically learn art on YouTube, and that's honestly what I did when I started to play around with phoning in some like my projects to give me more time to do independent studies. Yeah, like I'd always come to YouTube first. Like we got it figured out. It's all here and it's just growing. It's a virtuous cycle. It's an upward and outwardly spiraling tornado of content, and everyone's kind of competing to make more engaging content that's more effective in the art space. So it's like we're all competing to get you good at art faster on YouTube. I also know that's a very optimistic view of all the art content on YouTube. And with that optimism, I think I'm optimistic because it's all free. And there's really no commitment. You can stop the video at any time. You can stop this video at any time. Don't do it though. It's an open and accessible and more flexible learning structure. Easily fits into people's lives. If there ever could be a one-size-fits-all curriculum for people, it might be just getting into the YouTube art education algorithm. It'll eventually take you somewhere. I also think that the stuff they tell you to buy in art school is mostly useless. Like some classes you have to go out and buy technical pens and French curves and certain types of rulers, along with like the textbook that you know you guys won't read. They're little purchases, but they all do add up, and especially in first year, because they know you're first year students, and it's easy to be really pushy because you're in a new place and you're kind of scared and you think you're on eggshells. They just tell you to buy more stuff, so you go out and buy like the highest grade paints because they tell you to buy it. I don't think that's necessary. I think to the art learner, to the layman's eye, most Walmart paints would be fine to learn art, learn painting, learn color, and more importantly, it's just more dispensable, so you're just less precious with it. Like you'll be okay to get messy, and you'll be okay to experiment, and you'll be okay to fail when it's like $10 paints. $10 for the paint pack, I should clarify. So I don't like that they tell you to buy a lot of this stuff, because the reality is that most professional artists, me and Celestia, we were talking about what Artist 2 looks like, you know, because we're already here at DALL-E 2. It's time for Artist 2, and Artist 2 is mostly a digital artist. On their deliverables and on their process, there will always be a digital component. I think a lot of the supplies, a lot of the design supplies, I didn't really use. And the thing with buying technology, though, is that you can always sell it after, which is a consideration, especially if paying tuition with your own money or whatever, especially because money's tight. So tablets and tablet monitors, other art gadgets usually have some resale value, whereas like kind of paints and brushes, canvases, rulers and stuff, pens, and typically you probably won't sell it. And my last point, which isn't really fair, is that I think it's strange that art school doesn't have art therapy, that art therapy isn't a larger component to the education. Like if you think about most artists, there is no manual on how the muse works, how creativity works. Most people don't have a creative theory. Most people only understand their relationship with their art only at the surface level, that they've known it all their life. I think there's huge value in having an art counseling psychology professional working with the students in group sessions, in workshops, or even just having a contractor in an office for students to go to that's not just a counselor but is like an art therapist. I think we've been long overdue for that, and I think students are kind of being shorted. There is no mention or attempt at that incredibly useful and interesting side of things called art therapy. Yeah, just because, like, you know, artists got problems, man. Artists got art problems, and sometimes just a regular counselor might not do it for you. Who do we go to when we talk about our art problems? If we could solve our own art problems, they wouldn't be problems, right? Having more awareness, having more artist awareness, which is what I feel like the biggest benefit of art therapy is, this expanding of your artist awareness. That's huge. And how could you say that's not useful? A useful soft skill for any artist or art student. That should definitely be a part of the curriculum. And this isn't something that you'd learn from just like doing homework, from writing essays. This is something that you learn with a professional who is specifically trained in this, not say like a painting instructor or the typography instructor. I think you shouldn't expect to learn like specific soft skills, like how to be a better speaker, how to be more confident in yourself, art confidence, creative confidence, self-awareness. You will not learn those things from your studio classes, from the art instructors. It is wrong to assume that. People who you see thriving in art school already came in with those skills, generally speaking. And if you wanted to specifically develop those soft skills, then it's like practicing for anything else, where you have to train in specificity. If you want to learn a new party trick, you can't throw a ball at a wall and try and parse out the similar movements that you'd be doing with the other thing. No, you have to just do it. Just learn the party trick. Just keep on doing it with the thing you're gonna use until it works, until you figure it out. You have to be in context and in specificity. So, especially for something like art therapy, talking about these softer sides of the artist's awareness and creative confidence and stuff, you have to do just that. And that's not something that will necessarily happen in printmaking class or during your art history lecture. I would not expect that at all. A lot of students come out of art school really, just I'd say generally the same amount of socialized as they came in for. And what difference they did notice is a temporal growth, like just due to the fact that you've been in here for 5 years and that you're going to change as a person. So yeah, maybe you got a little bit better at speaking. You feel a little bit more confident now that you have a degree, and you can tell people that you have a degree. Was the environment itself positive, conducive to creativity? Yes, it is very positive. We saw some really cool stuff. There are really interesting little interactive galleries, interesting little like zine shelf thing, interesting little like fabric maze displays. What was weird is that as we were going higher and higher up into the building, climbing the Avery Tower in a sense, things got like more boring. So by the time we were on like the top floor, it was actually just like incredibly bland. It was incredibly bland. There's not much going on. Not much going on in the hallways, not much going on in the empty classrooms. And as Celestia observed, there was not much going on actively in filled classrooms either. There is a lot of creative space, but the creativity is more the vibe, dude. It's more about the students. It's more about the fact that the students are all together. I think creative environment, more of a B rank advantage, of a second class advantage. First class advantage would just be like you being a creative person, you exploring the nature of how you view your own personal, raw, organic creativity. And that's work that you have to do, and that's stuff that like you have to investigate that no one else can do for you. But it's a first class advantage because it'll work in every situation. Having to go to school to feel creative, it might be what you need right now. It's hard to count on it for the rest of your life. So our school is conducive to creativity, but I also, having been on both the fine arts and design side of things, I can also see that really backfiring. So the fine arts students, they really don't have a lot of homework, typically speaking. Like there's a way to not do a lot of homework if you don't want to and be like totally fine, which is just like to be more conceptual, and like that's totally fine. So I do think the fine arts students here had a bit more control over how much they could take a departure off of their lesser so training plan, because it's not a training program, more of their like a guided exploration program, was my impression of the biggest difference for how fine arts drawing, painting, media was doing their thing. So the school is a very creative place, and that's because of the students. But that also depends on your workload and whether or not you're able to spare the study time to work on just a weird passion project put up somewhere inside the school. And the thing is, for any of these projects, really, you don't need a school for them. It's just more fun when they're all collected in the same general area. You see really interesting downtown and even in the suburbs sometime. But the biggest difference is, and this is the thing that we'll keep coming back to, right,